Okay, so hey guys, and welcome back to another weekly fighting roundup, and of course got the boxing and MMA news. So if you're new around here and you haven't yet subscribed, please do so. Like it if you do need like video, and let's get straight into it. So, of course, starting off with the boxing news, and Conceição rematch Foster November 2nd with Muratalla vs Perez, Nova and Mills versus Lundy also on that same November 2nd card, and I've been really looking forward to this rematch. I think the first fight was two styles in which was going to gel, and it did gel, and I think the second fight is most likely going to kind of go the same way, and result-wise it could go either way, but I think it is definitely going to gel as a fight, and I'm glad that they've given Foster the opportunity to get the rematch because of course, Foster having to work really hard to get to the opportunities in which he's already had in his career. So to be able to not just be thrown aside after this loss, it's nice to see. McKinson versus Benj and Hennessy will fight October 19th. Ramirez will fight Billum Smith November 16th. I kind of spoke about that a bit last week because it was all like set and everything like that, but now it's been officially announced, and like I said, probably the weakest Riyadh season card so far as a whole, but still great fight this is, and I'm sure it's going to be a very tough test with Willem Smith, but he has been brought up, progressed nicely through the ranks. Ramirez is, of course, a very well-renowned champion and is looking in the best of his career at the moment, so it's going to be a very tough test for Willem Smith. I'm not too sure at the moment if I believe that he can do it or not, but like I say, we'll see. McCrory will fight Carrillo November 1st. Ramirez vs Barboza Jr. and Farmer vs Cepeda will fight November 16th, and they are two of the other fights on that card. And I think the Ramirez vs Barboza Jr. one was, it could have been a Golden Boy main event in itself, and maybe perhaps they would have got more money if they did that. I'm not too sure, but either way, it is a really good fight, and I think it is going to be a fight in which it's going to gel as a fight, and Barboza Jr. is coming off that shaky performance last time out, so he's going to need a good result here. But Ramirez has also been known to not have the best of performances and have question marks around him as well. So, like I say, I think it makes for a good fight. And Farmer versus Pedo is an interesting one. I'm not too sure which I'd rather see. If I'd rather see Farmer versus Cepeda, or if I'd rather see Cepeda versus Camboza Jr., which was originally talked about. I'm not too sure. Farmer is going to come for a fight, and I believe that, but I just think that Cepeda, I don't know if it's a step down or not, but it's just not a step up, really, in my opinion, in an opponent, and I would have liked to see him fight possibly somebody a bit higher up. I mean, a Valenzuela Jr. I really believed could have happened, but, either way. We have this. Canelo is open to fighting McGregor in 2025. I do believe, I'm going to speak a bit more about everything in a moment, but I do believe his options currently, it is in an interesting position, so I think he's going to be open to just fighting anybody, to be completely honest, anybody that's going to bring in any kind of money. Torres Jr. will fight Dawejko September 20th. Stevenson vs Cordina is off. That's sad to see, to be honest. Stevenson having to pull out, and that is, going to be, I think, actually kind of an interesting fight. I think it would have made Stevenson actually fight a bit more aggressive than what he's perhaps been doing in recent fights, but we'll see if it gets rearranged. It's not, I don't know, it's a weird matchup, but I think it could actually work. And so, yeah, we'll have to wait and see if it gets rearranged at some point. Udin vs Hussein, Davey and Gaskin will fight November 8th. Gilly vs Green, Barney Smith, Gonzalez, Fletcher, Bennett vs Webb, O'Massey, McGann vs Maycock, and Farrington will fight October 18th. Davies will fight Masood November 2nd. Estrada won't rematch Rodriguez and will move up to a bantamweight, and I think that makes sense, to be completely honest. I completely believe if he was to have rematched Rodriguez, then he would have lost badly, and badly even worse than last time, to be honest. I think Rodriguez is just a level above, so I think if he moves up in weight, I still think they're very tough tests. Like a Junta Nakatani would be a really tough test for him, but he's still a great fighter, Estrada, and he still had some amazing fights, so it's just going to be intriguing to see if from his next performance, whatever happens, if he's still got it in or not. And I do believe that he doesn't want to fight Rodriguez again, which, like I said, I don't really blame him in the point of the career in which he's at, and so that's most likely why he's moved up. And also because when you get older, the weight cuts and things like that will become harder. Davis and Benavidez are set to fight December 14th, back on the same card against, again, Gervonta Davis and David Benavidez. So another hopefully big card. Maybe see Morel Jr. versus Benavidez. We might see Valenzuela versus Davis. These are the names in which I'm hearing. Of course, things can change. December 14th is a long way away, but just nice to see that they're being somewhat active together, fighting on same cards on these PBC shows in which are really delivering at the moment. BBOFC have ordered Pauls versus Conway, Martinez won by split decision versus Puerta, Angeloni won by unanimous decision versus Medina, Gomez won by stoppage round 2 versus Perez, Hernandez won by unanimous decision versus Garcia, Smith, Brown, Harris, Murphy and Eubank versus Durgan will fight October 25th. Edwards will fight Yafai November 30th. I think that is a very good fight, to be honest. Hopefully, I might be there. We'll see. Doing interviews and everything like that. But in general, like I said, I think it is a really good fight. It's two guys in which do have that history behind them. And I think it somewhat makes sense as a fight. I believe as a nice all British fight is an excellent fight, and I do believe that Yafai, obviously still being earlier on in his career, is progressing towards world level, and this is going to be a really, really tough test for him in the point in the career in which he's at. But when you have that Olympic experience, it's nice to see them not get tiptoed through everything like that and actually get thrown into a big fight. So now I have to see if he can deliver or not. But Edwards is still at a very good point in his career and is still winning big fights, and I'm still wanting to put on shows, and so I'm sure this is going to be, like I say, a really good fight. Scott has said Wilder isn't retired yet, and he's mentioned names like Ngannou and Joshua still, so we'll see. I doubt either of them two fights will happen, but possibly he fight again, but it's not too sure really who I'm bothered about seeing him against at this point in his career, to be honest. Moving on, Riley is set to fight Chamberlain next. Smith versus Kelly is off, and Kelly will now fight Davis September 21st. So, of course, this weekend, of course, Kelly is going to fight Davis now. Sad to see Smith not fighting. I think he is wanting and actually should be coming back and trying to make amends of the last performance in which he had. And I don't think he was trying to pull out of this fight for any other reason than he kind of had to pull out the fight. But it gives a great opportunity to Davis, and someone who I've had the pleasure of speaking to a couple of times. It's great to see this opportunity be thrown his way on, even if it is on short notice. He was seemingly in training for his fight on the Prograis undercard. So yeah, I think it's going to make still for a great fight and possibly a tougher one than Kelly had before. We will have to wait and see. Canelo wants to rematch Bivol next. I'm going to speak a bit more about Canelo in a moment, but like I said, the options in which he has are interesting. Warren wants Joyce versus Yoka next. That's an intriguing matchup. I think it kind of does make sense, but it's weird because they're both in a really bad state in their career. Well, Yoka is coming off a win. It isn't a high level win at all, and the kind of expectations in which Yoka once had to progress have gone, but also that's the same with Joyce as well. The expectations everybody had on Joyce to do so well and to really impress have gone as well. So it makes sense, and it's going to be an intriguing matchup. Hopefully that actually ends up happening. Hughes will fight Antunes September 27th. Gibb will fight Slim next. That is a good little Misfits matchup. Hopefully that'll be on a big show. Weiss versus Molina and Beauchamp versus Bavington will fight October 19th. Lawson won by split decision versus Chance. Edmonds won by split decision versus Valera. Maeta won by TK round 2 versus Alves. Rahman won by unanimous decision versus Davis. Marrero won by TK round 2 versus Venable. Rivera won by unanimous decision versus Lee. Sanchez won by a KO in round 4 versus Leyva. Castabontes won by a KO in round 3 versus Maya. Caballero won by a KO in round 3 versus Mercado. Vega won by unanimous decision versus Dominguez. Rubel Carver won by a unanimous decision versus Castorena. Porras won by unanimous decision versus Torres to remain WBC Youth Silver Super Middleweight Champion. Mendoza won by a KO in round 3 versus Ramos. Hernandez won by a technical unanimous decision versus Matisse to remain WBA Continental American Super Featherweight Champion. And to speak a little bit about that card, Ruben Carver as a prospect is something that really does intrigue me. An excellent jab, and I just wanted to mention it. He is somebody from the undercard of that in which it really intrigues me, and I'm trying to really try my best with undercards and picking out fighters in which intrigue me and interest me, and I think will hopefully progress really well. And I think that's somebody who are genuinely good. But then to speak about the main event, Hernandez Matisse, there's been a lot of people saying that Matisse was deserving to win that one, and he was doing well. He was just kind of letting Hernandez walk onto punches, in which a lot of the time is the typical kind of recipe to stop these Mexican come forwards type fighters. Wait until they kind of go past the first few rounds, then typically they'll slow down a little bit more, and then you can kind of go on the back foot, and then they'll just walk forwards, walk onto shots and things like that. But it was weird, the whole kind of stoppage in general. I mean, there was a head clash, and that maybe started the cut a little bit, but the cut seemed to be under control then, and then a punch then caused the cut again. So perhaps it would have meant that, I've seen fights when it's been the home fighter not go to technical unanimous decision and just kind of give it the win to the person who can continue, if that makes sense. And Matisse was unfortunate to not have gotten the nod. I would like to see a rematch. I think it would perhaps make sense to see a rematch because of what happened with the injury and everything like that. But I'm just not sure if he will, because I just don't know how big of a name Matisse is. And if you wanted to see Hernandez move on to world level again, I don't think Matisse is really going to help that too much. And yeah, I just don't necessarily know. I don't know. It was also weird seeing the way they even reacted to winning that fight. He just looked so like he didn't really care, and that he didn't really believe in himself that he won, which was interesting to see. Massam drew versus Charalampos. Lepai Jr. won via TKO in round 2 versus Fial. Warren won via KO in round 1 versus Wright. Mayu won by decision versus Angelino. Fabio drew versus Varka. England won by stoppage in round 4 versus Beauchamp. Ahaya won by split decision versus Opelu. Nikia won via KO in round 3 versus Carpentry to become IBF Intercontinental and WBO Asian Pacific Cruiserweight Champion. And it was an interesting, I believe it was like one of the first Joe Parker events or something like that. But he's putting on shows now, which I think is great for Australian boxing. I think you have to get to that point in your career and give back to where you came from and everything like that. And he seems to be doing that now. It wasn't really a crazy big show or anything. It was a nice stoppage for Nyika. And I'd like to see him progress in the cruiserweight scene. And if he's got the backing of Joseph Parker, then he could go a long way. But like I say, in general, that's just the main thing I wanted to talk about. How much I appreciate the fighters, like I say, giving back to where they're from and things like that. Moving on. Shadolov won by a decision versus Escobar. Wall won by a KO round 3 versus Cascone. Gore Derico won by a TKO round 3 versus Vom Berge. Lasata won by a decision versus Sharnakevich. Gubeladze won by a KO round 1 versus Forkakosic. Shala won by a TKO round 3 versus Rate. Tahiri won by a decision versus Veron. Aliha won by a TKO round 3 versus Pavlov. And he's somebody that, with Argon Sports Promotions, or whatever, sorry if I'm pronouncing it wrong, is somebody who's progressing well and has got himself a high level world ranking, and as an Italian fighter, I believe he's Italian ranked #1. Um, and I know there ain't loads of Italian talent, but that's interesting. And he's good. I like him. I think he can. He's warranted. A progression. He's had that IBO title, and he's now gone off away from that and just been fighting to just keep active and keep the rank going and things like that. And I think he could possibly get into a higher level, and I would like to see him go up against one of the highly ranked guys. Now we'll just have to wait and see who that could be, but hopefully they're waiting. And Argon Sports managed to do it with William Skull, getting him the opportunity for the title now. So perhaps Ali could come slide in and get an opportunity for some sort of world title or some sort of highly ranked fight himself. Namagan Bent won via TK round 2 versus Williams. Lopez won via unanimous decision versus Medina. Rodriguez won via KO round 3 versus Villa. Romero won via unanimous decision versus James. Fulton won via split decision versus Castro. Plant won via KO round 9 versus McCumbee to become interim world WBA super middleweight champion. Lara won by stoppage round 9 versus Garcia to remain WBA world middleweight champion. Canelo won via unanimous decision versus Balanga to remain WBC, WBA and WBO world super middleweight champion. And to speak a bit more about that card in general, go through my prediction, go through what I thought about the fights, and the main ones. I mean, in general, it was shocking to see Villa lose via stoppage versus Rodriguez. That was a big shock. That was probably one of the biggest shocks of the card. But Romero, that was a comfortable unanimous decision victory. I think he has improved as a fighter, and from the earlier points in his career, and yeah, I think it's just nice to see him improve. I believed he would win. I don't think James was at that level to be able to beat him or to even realistically get close, to be honest. I mean, he hadn't really fought anywhere near that level, and it did show, in my opinion. And Romero had pretty much an answer to anything he threw, and I think he's becoming a bit better of a boxer. Do I think he's ever going to be able to get back to a proper world level? No, but I think there are some fun fights out there out for him, and hopefully we can see him in some of them now. I don't necessarily think, like I say, world title fights should be there ready waiting for him, but fun fights would make sense in my opinion for him now. The Fulton win versus Castro was an interesting one. Fulton, I mean, I got my Romero prediction right. My Fulton one, I also got right, but I believe I said it would be a close fight. It kind of would make sense for me to have said that because Castro has been in close fights with every kind of highly ranked guy he's ever fought against, lost against, and this was another case. And Fulton just looked a bit slower. He looked a bit didn't look quite as smooth and clean in which we've seen a lot of the time. I think his footwork didn't look amazing, especially until he got dropped, and then he got dropped and then it improved a bit, and he made a few adjustments and it looked a bit better. And he did some nice things. There was some clean bits in there in which we've seen from that vintage kind of Fulton, but I don't necessarily know if he's that good at this weight. Moving up in weight, I don't know. He just didn't, like I say, look typical of what we've seen from him, but that might be the effect coming off the loss, coming off the long amount of time off, and so there's various different reasons as to why he might have not put on his best performance there, but still got a win against, like I say, a really tough operator, and it will be intriguing to see how his career progresses now. Plant as well, that was a good performance from him. I mean, obviously he got dropped early on. McCumbee came on strong. He was kind of explosive, and I think just in general caught Plant out. I don't really think he really properly hurt him, but when you see a good, confident Caleb Plant, he's really entertaining, to be honest, and he put on a show up there realistically and was just really kind of showing him his level after he got dropped and made the adjustments necessary and kind of just nullified him completely. And that's what you want to see from coming back from losses and wanting to get back to a high level and be on this revenge tour in which everybody's saying he's on. So I think that's the step in the right direction, and there are really big fights available for him in the super middleweight division. I would love to see him versus a Diego Pacheco. Will that fight happen? I don't know, because it's PBC and Matchroom working together, and I'm just not too sure if that's going to be happening. But it would be a fight in which I would love to see. And like I said, there's other various super middleweight fights in which I'd love to see as well. So I think Plant is definitely not done yet, and I'm just excited to see when he is in this confident mindset, putting on these performances, where he will go. Moving on to the Lara fight, I got the Plant prediction right. The Lara one I also got right. I thought he'd be able to stop him versus Garcia, and Garcia, to be honest, did look poor in that fight. He just looked like a different type of fighter. I think the years off really have played a toll, and moving up in weight, Lara looked a lot bigger, and there was just nothing really coming from Garcia. Garcia just looked like he didn't really want to be in there. He looked like he didn't really care too much, and Lara didn't really have to do too much to be able to comfortably win. And he boxes like that of a 41-year-old. Doesn't really. He's very efficient in his work, and I still think there is more for Lara to give. I think there are wins in which he can still have, but possibly he might have to keep picking the opponents in which the way he is doing to be able to keep that belt. But like I say, it's nice to see him fighting, but I think that's the end of Garcia's career, to be completely honest. Like, it gets to that point where it is just like there's not really much left to give, and obviously he was the younger guy in this fight, but he seemed like a much older guy, and it seemed like the career had kind of played a toll on him. But Canelo, that was another excellent performance against Berlanga. It had flashes of that Munguia performance realistically, and you kind of give that toughness award to the opponent. Everybody was saying how tough Munguia is and things like that, and now everybody's saying how tough Berlanga is. Of course, it's an amazing matchup to make, and hopefully we will see that fight down the line. But in general, Canelo, another vintage Canelo performance. Again, just shutting out a top contender coming through, and with the knockdown as well, and everything like that, he just put out a really good dominant display, and it was a more entertaining version of Canelo as well. He was talking and everything like that, and getting the crowd going, and really kind of playing up to Belanga's kind of excitement being in that big opportunity. And yeah, he just makes other opponents question himself, and I believe that Berlanga was questioning himself throughout the majority of that fight, and Canelo would just completely, like I say, shut him out and did what he had to do. Vintage Canelo performance realistically, nothing too different to what we've seen from recent performances from him, and who's going to be able to stop him now? Like I say, there are weird options available to him. I mean, the Eubank Jr. one is a possibility. Maybe I wouldn't mind seeing that. I mean, people like a Diego Pacheco, I don't necessarily think, like I say, he's ready there to be able to be thrown into a world title. David Benavidez, I don't think is going to happen. The Dmitry Bivol one, in which he's talking about, he's then going to have to wait until, of course, the result of the Beterbiev one, and there possibly could be even a rematch if that fight's close. So I don't necessarily know if he wants to be sitting around. He says that he wants to be fighting in May, so possibly we see that Eubank Jr. fight. It wouldn't even surprise me, to be completely honest. But as long as he keeps fighting the way he is, there are a lot of guys in which I believe he does still beat comfortably, and I'm not going to give away too many names just yet. Moving on, Virgo won by TKO in round 1 versus Batista. Henderson won by unanimous decision versus Avila. Virgo won by unanimous decision versus Henderson. Stokey won by unanimous decision versus sorry, my bad, I've just forgotten his name, to be honest. Kells won by TKO round 3 versus Tobes. Jade won by unanimous decision versus Haru. Raksu won by majority decision versus Ham. Cray won by unanimous decision versus Knight. Poker won by unanimous decision versus Pittman. And Brook won by unanimous decision versus Savage. And it was another interesting Misfit show, to be honest. Probably one of the better ones in which we've seen from recent shows. And that is, I think, credit to the shows in general. I think they'd seen that there was a bit of a drop off, and they were struggling without, of course, KSI fighting and things like that, and so they knew they had to really do something and change something to be able to keep the eyes on Misfits. And to be honest, this show was a good show, and they've been active with their shows, and now they've just come back with a good show here, and they had a good one not too long ago, which had a lot of eyes around that as well. They've got names now in which they've built up nicely, and it's not, of course, just YouTube boxing anymore, but there's an interesting market in which is being executed very well, and things like the pro state tournament. It was interesting. Two fights in one night is always going to be interesting for anybody, and a little tournament setup is going to create hype and bring interest to the fighters in which are fighting, which of course don't really have that bigger names in themselves. And Virgo managed to get the win. I mean, it was ended up being quite a close fight for Henderson. Henderson really fought well for that first boxing fight of his, and Avila in their previous fight, I thought Avila would be able to win, but just kind of swinging away. That's kind of um, Diaz style, which he had, of course, Diaz in his corner, and it just didn't work. Henderson was just able to see everything coming like that. And the one time I believe I actually predicted Avila to win a fight, he then, of course, didn't. But Virgo was just too much for him in the end of Henderson. Probably just a bit too fast, in my opinion, a bit too explosive. Would have liked to see him actually use his jab a bit more, but of course, he didn't really fancy doing that and still managed to get the win either way. Stokey, that performance was a very good performance. I'm so sorry, I can't remember the name of his opponent, but yeah, in general, that was a very good performance from him. It's still very low level boxing, but for a first fight, it creates a bit of a interest around him now as a Misfits fighter. Of course, another guy who's not really got a massive platform. I got that one right. But the Kells one, I believe, right as well. That was quite a big stoppage, to be honest, but quite a big knockout. The Jade one, I got wrong. Crew just really couldn't get inside, couldn't get anything past Jade's jab, and Jade pretty much just did the whole thing, the whole fight, which was just back foot, just straight, far away shots. She ended up very much in the air, as far away from Crew's fists as possible. Crew being, of course, a much smaller fighter, and Crew took a lot of damage, kept coming forwards, but in the end, you did kind of know that that was going to happen. And yeah, I mean, credit to Jade. The Raksu one was a interesting fight, to be completely honest. I think Raksu did well to just time Ham onto a lot of shots, and I think I would like to see a rematch between them two again, to be completely honest. The Craig Ray one versus Knight, I mean, I got the Raksu one, I believe, right. The Craig Ray one, I got wrong. Craig Ray was boxing well early on as well, and really kind of, you know, playing up to Knight and just not really doing what he wanted him to do, and then not really going with his pace and his tempo and disrupting that quite a lot. And it's really difficult for any kind of boxer to be able to deal with that disrupt tempo and being able to adjust to another opponent's tempo when you're so used to fighting at your pace and being able to control fights. And Craig did that well. I think Knight was coming on later on into the fight and possibly could have had better signs later on, but he didn't do enough in the time limit, and Craig moves on to the final against Yuri Gang in their, I believe, their rematch now. Poker did very well versus Pittman, so did Brook. They are two quality fighters. I think, Pittman and Savage didn't really have a lot. I mean, Pittman looked like she was struggling. Full credit to them both, they're very tough, but Pittman looked like she was really struggling, of course, with her leg and everything, and like I say, full credit for being able to get all the rounds, but yeah, in general, you kind of knew that they would be tough, but they wouldn't be able to have too much boxing ability, and I believe that was the same for both of them. Brooke did box very well, just very disciplined a lot of the time, and that's what it's just nice to see when a lot of the Misfits fights, women's fights, are quite messy. It's nice to see just a nice, disciplined, clean performance, and Brooke now might rematch Paige Van Zandt again. I'm not too sure what's happening with that, but she is one of the big faces of Misfits boxing currently, and like I say, she is actually really improving with every fight. Moving on now to the MMA news. There's a bit more boxing news. My apologies. Lawson won by KO in round one versus Cobbs. Thompson won via TKO round one versus Hadley. McElroy won by TKO round 3 versus Bolden. Savage drew versus Jackson. Smith won by KO round 4 versus Cruz. Lawson 3 won by KO round 4 versus Veron. Hicks won by unanimous decision versus Austin. Holmes Jr. won by unanimous decision versus Noriega to remain IBF USBA Super Welterweight Champion. And it was a nice Salita Promotions card with Holmes Jr. with a comfortable performance, really kind of just showing that boxing ability in which he has. Not really got that puncher in which he wants to have, but just in general, just that boxing ability, and it's really clean with a lot of the work in which he's doing, and that was a comfortable performance for him. Moving on now to the MMA news. Jones vs Miocic and Chandler vs Oliveira 2 will fight November 16th. Finally, it's been announced that Jones vs Miocic is happening. It said it would be around November, and fingers crossed it actually is end up happening now. Jones has said that this is probably going to be his last one, which is sad to see, but possibly it might not be. We'll have to wait and see how the performance goes and how he's feeling afterwards and everything like that. If it's another really comfortable performance, then he might just be wanting to fight again. But Miocic, I'm intrigued to see how much he's got left. There's a lot of talk about him being past his best and everything like that. If he comes and gets a big win here, that's a huge result for him. And that really shuts a lot of people up. So I'll be intrigued to see if he has that in him to be able to do it. And then Chandler vs Oliveira, of course, Chandler waiting around the whole 2 years for the McGregor fight to then, of course, that not end up happening. I'd be frustrated if I was him, and he seems like he is, but I was intrigued to see how long he was actually willing to wait for that fight. And of course, now we've got the Oliveira one, which, to be honest, is a kind of two separate fighter stylistic wise, but I think it will make for a good rematch. And yeah, as to that card, and I think if there's a few more big fights on that card, that could be a really big November 16th show. With also Craig versus Nickel announced on that one as well. And there's been a few other ones announced, which I'll speak about next week. BKFC have partnered with DAZN, which is really just becoming the actual face of combat sports now, which is crazy to think from where they once were. Whereas Junior won by unanimous decision versus Aori, Van won by decision versus Chares, Souza won by submission in round 1 versus Jaru Gyuri, Bahamondes won via KO in round 1 versus Torres, Dumont won via decision versus Aldana, Rodriguez won via decision versus Osborne, Ribovics won via decision versus El Huber, Lopez won via decision versus Ortega, Shevchenko won via decision versus Grasso to become UFC flyweight champion, Davalishvili won via decision versus O'Malley to become UFC bantamweight champion. And to speak about this card, of course, in the Sphere, it was incredible to just see all the setup and everything like that. It was actually just kind of beautiful, to be honest. I mean, what they managed to do with everything, and in general, it was an amazing event. One of the actual best combat sports events in general, just from the whole setup and everything like that. And I love what they did with everything with the ring girls and keeping it in theme so much as well. It was really good to see, and yeah, that just was an actual spectacle. When you speak about spectacles, that was what you would describe as that. And there was some good fights in it as well. And the Ribovic El Huber fight was a great fight. I really respect the ref for not really stopping the fight. Obviously, you don't want to see fighters get hurt too much and take too much punishment. It'd be too tough for their own good. But that was a really excellent fight, and two guys who completely gelled, similar type styles, I believe, and really just gelled in the fight together. Lopez, that decision versus Ortega, I got my prediction right for that one. I believe that Lopez, I think I said you would have stopped him, but every fight that Lopez is going to be in is going to be entertaining. It's going to be bringing a lot of energy, and Ortega hurt again early, pretty much just brought back to life with a two-punch combination, knocked out, and then brought back with the one shot, then the other shot, which was really incredible to see. But yeah, that's a really big statement win, and he looked very impressive in that fight. Ortega, of course, very, very tough, and he, of course, couldn't stop him, which I'm sure frustrated him a little bit, but yeah, he really brought that energy throughout all of the fights, and there are, I believe, options available for him in the featherweight division. Now we'll have to wait and see where he progresses and who he might go on to fight next, but I do believe possibly after the Holloway Topura fight, that could make for a BMF title fight plus a title fight in itself. I think Lopez has the capability to have that BMF type style with just how entertaining his fights are. Shevchenko, that performance versus Grace, I got my prediction wrong, I believe. I think I said Grace would win via submission, and she was close multiple times, and I thought Shevchenko would make a mistake, in which she did in the previous performance, and in which kind of led to Grace go for multiple submission attempts, in which Grace did try and do in this one, but Shevchenko was very good at just being able to get out of them and just be able to deal with them, and she clearly trained a lot and just kind of dealing with submissions and getting out of bad positions, which is really impressive. And in general, Shevchenko had been dominant in probably the first two fights. I mean, the last one she was pretty dominant, and she was pretty dominant in the first one before she got stopped as well. So you kind of did get that feeling in which Grasso kind of did have to stop Shevchenko, and she just couldn't. And she was at the point in which she was really just struggling on the feet and just kind of throwing shots for the sake of it to then just be taken down. And yeah, it was a not the best performances from Grasso, but Shevchenko now back as a champion, one of the actual women's UFC in general legends, Hall of Fame most likely, and she's up there with the Amanda Nunes's of the UFC, to be completely honest. And then Dvalishvili, that win versus O'Malley, that was an interesting fight. I got my prediction right for that one. I was really excited for the fight, and I think it kind of did go the way in which I thought it went to an extent. Obviously, everything that happened with O'Malley's coach shouting it at Dvalishvili again, shouting again, and Dvalishvili just shutting him up straight away. That was quite funny. Dvalishvili then kissing O'Malley, then getting punched when he tried to pull away before the bell was interesting. I didn't really like how the ref was continuously trying to get him to tell him to work and things like that when he was doing that. Obviously, people will say it's not the most entertaining of styles and things like that, but he just does what you have to do to be able to win, and it's really, really hard to deal with. And he looks so strong. O'Malley just looked very weak in that fight before, and I'm not too sure if it's the weight or anything like that, or just if Dvalishvili is really, really strong. But every takedown just looked like O'Malley was going. He looked like he couldn't deal with Dvalishvili, and just did look off. Possibly was, he did get him hurt into the later rounds, so he possibly could have come on if there were a couple more rounds, but that's of course not how the UFC works. But Dvalishvili, credit to him, that was a brilliant performance, and he's a deserved champion now. And I know he's got a lot of backlash from the performance, but we'll have to wait and see where he goes on to next. There is talks, of course, about him versus Magomedov, and he didn't really seem too keen on that, which I'm not surprised. It seems like a lot of people aren't really too keen on fighting him, but I'm sure he will if the money's right. It makes sense, and possibly, in my opinion, that could make sense. It seems like we won't be seeing O'Malley for a while now. He says he wants to take 9 to 10 months out, so I don't know necessarily if that's the best for his career, but that's what he wants to do. I'm sure he's not in the best of headspaces right now with everything, of course, that's just happened. So it'll be interesting to see where he goes. But I think in general the bantamweight division is really interesting right now. I mean, I'd love to see Figgy versus Aldo, Dvalishvili versus Nurmagomedov, O'Malley versus Sandhagen. They will all be great fights, but like I say, we'll have to wait and see if they actually end up happening. But credit to Dvalishvili, excellent UFC event, and hopefully more to come of these ones at the Sphere. I'd be completely up for it, and maybe with different themes and things like that, could be entertaining concepts in which could be made. But yeah, that's it for today's video. Hope you did enjoy. Like if you did, like this, subscribe if you're new, and thanks for watching.